You're thinking of moving to Celina, Texas, and you're curious, what are the pros and cons of living here? Today I'm going to go over everything from the top schools, future growth developments, and some of the cons like commute times, and something that a lot of people don't think about that affects their future when they decide to move here to Celina. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything about living in Frisco, Celina, Prosper, and the surrounding suburbs, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss any of the latest updates. My name is Jake Enderman. I was born and raised here in North Texas, and I've helped numerous families relocate, navigate the new construction, pre-owned market, and pricing all across DFW. My team and I love helping people relocate and make a move here, whether you're 9 days or 9 months out. Feel free to reach out. All of our contact info is below in the description, but let's get into the pros and cons of Celina. First big pro for Celina is going to be the school districts. It's something a lot of people bring up. Now, part of Celina is going to be zoned to Prosper ISD, which is an A-rated school. Celina is a B-rated. TexasSchool.gov has Prosper at a 91 out of 100 A rating and Celina at an 87. So they're both really strong academically, and I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. Now, Celina is going to be a little bit newer of a development versus Prosper. You're going to have newer schools. It feels like most communities here have an elementary school inside of the community, so you're going to have the most updated facilities. Of course, more teachers as there's more schools to keep your class sizes a little smaller. So you're going to have a better student to teacher ratio in Celina than a lot of other surrounding districts, which a lot of people feel like is a big upgrade. Something else great about the school district is all the activities. Of course, we're in Texas, so sports are going to be a huge deal, especially football. But they still have band, choir, theater, and other academic opportunities for kids to take advantage of. Some ag programs, other more blue-collar routes. If you know, maybe your kid isn't wanting to go to college, they've got other routes they can explore. Something else to think about long-term is since these are highly sought-after school districts, if you ever decide to move, whether that's locally here in Texas or you're moving out of state after you buy, is you're gonna have a better resale and long-term value in these school districts versus some less sought after ISDs. So, of course, if you have kids, this is going to be a big reason for you to move to Celina, and a big pro. Of course, if you don't, it's kind of neutral unless you're after long-term value, then of course, that's always something to keep in mind. Of course, all the new schools and new buildings are great, but one of the trade-offs you're going to get is you're going to be a little bit further north. Celina feels really far. Especially just a few years ago, it wasn't super well known. It was some little bitty old farm town up north, kind of, up there. No one really knew where it was. But with the expansion of the Dallas North Tollway, Highway 289, all the traffic improvement, it's really not as bad as you might expect, especially looking on a map. It looks super far away from Dallas, but most of it's highway driving, so you're going to be about 45 minutes or an hour away. That's with minimal traffic. Of course, I'd assume if you're driving, during rush hour time, probably hour or so, maybe a little bit longer, but that's pretty normal, especially if you're going to live further out. Something else to keep in mind, if you travel a lot for work or lots of vacations, you're only about 45 or 55 minutes to the DFW airport. So that's not too bad either, especially if you're relocating from a big metro area, you're probably about used to that. Now, where Celina is really going to shine is if you're commuting to Frisco for work, which has a ton of major job hubs. You're about 20 to 30 minutes. Once they finish the Dallas North Tollway extension, you're going to be closer to that 20-minute mark. So not bad at all. Frisco, of course, has a lot of corporate offices and dining as well, healthcare, retail, all that. So ton in Frisco. For Plano, which has a lot of also major job stops, AT&T just announced they're moving their headquarters. You're in about 30 to 40 minutes depending on traffic, and of course once the DNT is done, expect that to drop a little bit. So it puts you within reach of several job markets without having to live in some congested areas downtown. And I'm sure you probably know where Prosper is. It's pretty much next door. It's the next town south, so you're only 10 or 15 minutes. Could be less depending on the area, and you've got Gates of Prosper for all your shopping and eats and some work. So Prosper is hardly even a commute. It's right next door. Something to consider moving to Celina, you're probably not moving here because you want to live right next to work. You're going to choose Celina because you get a little bit more space. You're further out, your money stretches a little bit further on a home. Average price point in Celina is mid to high fives versus Frisco is the sevens, just to put some perspective into it. So, you're not going to be sitting in congestion all day to and from work, but you're going to have a further drive. So just something to think about if commute is a concern. It's doable. It's a main factor and deciding factor for you on where you live. You may want to consider a closer city. The next pro is going to be, you're going to get, of course, everything brand new and better amenities. And we're going to go over what some of the future growth looks like for the city over the next few years. So be sure to stick around for that. A lot of the neighborhoods in Celina right now are master planned communities. So you're going to get not just a great home, but some pretty awesome resort style pools, playgrounds, walking trails, fitness centers. Some of them have their own restaurants in them. So you get about everything within the community that you need. A lot of these communities that you're seeing, the new theme across a lot of North Texas is that you never have to leave your home, right? You have everything you need right there. Another big advantage is a lot of these homes are new construction, so they're going to be way more energy efficient than a lot of older homes you're going to find as you get closer to Dallas. You're going to get, newer windows, better insulation, HVAC systems are a little more modern, and just overall better. I'll give you an example for that. My dad lives in a home built in, I think, the early 2000s. His electric bill is like $300 to $400 a month. Mine in a 2025 new build is about $100 to $150. So it's a big difference, especially in the extreme Texas heat and summers. Your HVAC doesn't have to work as hard. Another advantage of Celina is, of course, there are some older neighborhoods, but most of them are going to be new builds. So ideally, most of the time, you're not going to have to deal with your constant repairs. Your roof should be good for a while unless we get a crazy hailstorm. You've got most of the time warranty on your plumbing and foundations. You've got a lot of warranties and peace of mind. This is also great if you're a first-time home buyer, right? You don't want to have to be worried about if an HVAC system goes out and you don't have 20 grand. Another great thing, even if it's not brand new construction, most of the homes are newer, so they're going to be more built for how we live today, right? Most people don't have a need for formal, dining rooms anymore. Of course, you still see them in a few homes, and if that's something you want, we'll find it for you. But you're not going to pay for square footage you don't use. They're going to be a lot more open concept, kitchen overlooking the living room with the dining right there. And of course, like I mentioned, so many people are moving to Celina because they see the trade-off is worth it, living a little further north to get a little bit more house versus what they may get if they live closer to Dallas. With all the new growth and construction, it's great and all, but one con is you're going to have to deal with a lot of construction. And that's going to be both inside your neighborhood and around the city in general. However, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Later in this video, I'm going to go over what they're building with all of that growth. So be sure to stick around and watch that. You may be wondering, okay, what's it going to look like inside the neighborhood? Now, right now I live in a new construction. I can't hear it, but I'm watching a crane pour concrete right now. You're going to have to deal with, some loud noises, especially if it's, right next door, people framing, nail guns. May have to deal with some nails in your tire. We've had a few of those. It's part of it. You've got to think what you're getting for that. Is it worth it? It's something you have to weigh out. And of course, as the city continues to grow, they've got to widen the roads. Of course, they're extending the Dallas North Tollway. So right now, until you get to Prosper, Highway 289 is a little rough driving on. It's not terrible, but there's a lot of four-way stops and, it's not smooth flowing traffic. So it's going to be a little bit slower drives in certain areas, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. Now, something else to think about in the community is when it rains. If I have some videos, I'll overlay them. But I'm on the bottom of a hill, all the new constructions in the back, and they contain the dirt the best they can. But when it rains, it pours, right? So of course that dirt overflows. You're gonna get a lot of mud in your streets. Your truck's gonna get dirty, or car. And then of course, once it dries, they have a street sweeper and everything gets pretty dusty, right? So that's something to think about if you really don't like your car being dusty. Hopefully you have room in the garage. If not, you're going to be washing it a lot. So that's up to you if that's worth it. If those don't bother you, no biggie. But if that's something you're like, I really don't want to have to deal with, then Celina may not be the best fit for you. You may want to go with a little bit more established town. Celina's turning from a little small town to one of the big cities here in North Texas. So like I said, if you want something that's quiet, there are some neighborhoods that are more developed, like Light Farms, that there's not going to be as much construction and we could get you in if you're really set on Celina. But Of course, you're going to get a lot of great amenities and long-term growth that a lot of buyers are willing to live with until they get there. Now, of course, with all the ongoing construction, there's a ton of future growth in the communities and population. Celina back in, I think it was 2010, was only about 6,000 people pre-2020. It's right about 16 or 17,000. It's currently at about 50,000, and by about 2030, they're expecting close to 100,000 people. So it's going to boom and grow super fast, and a lot faster than a lot of people expect. The good news and exciting news with this is the city's already pre-planning a lot of the roads. So you're not going to have to go from 50,000 to 100,000 people and have to deal with the 2-lane road, right? They're already expanding those, a lot of commercial developments to make your everyday conveniences easier, put in more grocery stores, dining, retail, whatever you may need, and makes life convenient for you. Here's the good news. A lot of it's being built, a lot of it's catching up. Prosper's already built out a lot, and the good news is you're only about 20 or 25 minutes from the HEB in Prosper if you live in Celina, which I love HEB. Their guacamole, absolute go-to for watching football on Sundays. But anyways, there's a lot of infrastructure, roads. As far as entertainment, you're not too far from Frisco. It's not really Celina growth, but good to know the Universal Kids Resort, you're only gonna be about 20 minutes from, and not have to pay Frisco prices to live right by it. And honestly, the best news for you is it's still developing and not done. You're gonna be able to get in early before a lot of the amenities are completed and the demand that usually follows once that happens. So right now it feels quieter compared to a lot of the other nearby cities, but that's kind of the point and the best opportunity you have. You're buying into, some momentum of the population growth and going to get in at a better time. And all the amenities and conveniences of everyday life like grocery stores, shopping, dining, retail, all of that are not going to be far behind you. That's what a lot of people really love about Celina, is it's a huge upside for them. So I definitely keep it on your list if you're considering a move here to North Texas. If you've watched this far, I appreciate it. Be sure to stick around. The last con, I'm going to go over something that really catches a lot of people off guard in their budget and something to take account for whenever you do move to Celina. All the future growth is great, but if it's not quite here and that's a deal breaker for you, this one's going to be a con. You're going to have your limited dining and retail, just, especially compared to like your Friscos and Prospers and a lot more of your built out suburbs. Just a few years ago, Celina was a little farm town. So while you have your local restaurants, coffee spots, and your basic conveniences, great hole in the wall places to eat, you're going to be missing those chain restaurants, shopping centers, and nightlife that, you're going to find in more established cities like your Friscos, Dallas, even Prosper. So if that's something that's a deal breaker for you, you're not going to be able to just pull up on one of the main streets and be able to choose Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Chipotle. You may be driving a little bit further to find that. And it's not too far of a drive into there. Like I said, Frisco's about 20 to 30 minutes. You're going to have everything you need there, especially eating out or shopping. So you're not an unreasonable distance to where it's an absolute hike to have to get there, but it needed to be mentioned. This one really comes down to personal preference on if you want to be 5-10 minutes from everything, or if you're okay having to drive 20 or 30 minutes until the population grows and everything's built out. So, if you want walkable retail like, Legacy West, or, what Fields of Frisco is going to be, Gates of Prosper, and a ton of dining options, or, like, hey, I have to have this today. Celina isn't going to check that box yet. Depending when you watch this, a couple years down the road, it might. So be sure to reach out to me for the latest updates on if you have any questions on what it looks like. But, a lot of buyers are willing to still make the move and make a short drive in for their favorite eats and restaurants and groceries. The next big reason so many people love Celina is you get way more home for your money, but there's a catch. The secret on that's getting out. We'll get into more of that a little bit later. If you're moving from out of state, a ton of buyers absolutely love Celina because you get way more house in the surrounding areas, or maybe the state you're coming from. If you're moving from a high expense state, it feels like you're gonna be able to buy the Taj Mahal here. Right now the median home price in Celina is, the mid to high fives, versus in Frisco, the median is going to be a lot closer to that $700,000 range for the average home. So, that's almost or a little over $100,000 more that you pay, to live 20, 30 minutes closer to Dallas. And for the same budget, you're going to see more square footage, bigger lots, newer communities and amenities. in Celina compared to some of the other surrounding suburbs. Of course, like we talked about earlier, the trade-off is got to live a little further out. You may be wondering, what is that average home in Celina going to look like in the mid fives? You're going to get 3 to 5 bedrooms, anywhere from the low 2,000 square foot all the way up to about 3,000 square foot. So you're going to get a lot more value without sacrificing the quality. You know, there's still going to be your brand new home, super energy efficient, your open concept layouts, and all the other bells and whistles that the builders put on, security features, energy saving stuff, all that. This last con is one thing I think, you know, everyone needs to be aware of. You're not going to notice it the first year you move in. It's going to be something you notice in the following years. And that's going to be that Celina home prices are rising pretty rapidly. You know, they're not what they used to be just a few years ago. The average home price used to be about 450, mid fours, and now it's close to 600. Now, that's not to say there's not some great $400,000 homes. I helped a family find a great home for, you know, just over 400,000, giant corner lot or pie-shaped lot in a cul-de-sac, plenty of room for their boys to run around in. But there's two cases to think about this. If you've been on the sidelines, you know, you're going to see prices continue to go up, and that home you want, you may not be able to afford now. The good news is rates did hit under 6% today. So fingers crossed, those keep going down for you. But something to think about. And then if you've been in the market and are buying, you know, plan that your property taxes and your mortgage payment is going to go up a little bit each year. So make sure you don't stretch yourself too thin when buying, and, you know, be shocked when prices jump super quickly. However, the con here isn't really that Celina's overpriced. It's that the window for cheap Celina has really closed and shortened. You know, you're kind of on the back end compared to a few years ago, which can understandably be a mental hurdle for some people. But for other buyers, you know, while prices have risen, you know, looking at the surrounding suburbs, they're still like, look, I'm going to get a great home, more home than I could in most other areas. Going to get great school districts, and, you know, all the everyday conveniences are eventually going to be built and moved towards me. I just think that's something that's important to prepare people for, and, you know, so they're not caught off guard when that happens. So here's the bottom line. Celina isn't just growing, it's booming. You're going to get a lot more home for your money, strong school districts, and a lot of exciting future growth opportunities here. However, the flip side is the secret's out. People know about it. You're going to see prices rising fast, and the longer you wait, the harder it is going to be for you to lock in that value that you could get just a few years ago in Celina. Whether you're a first-time buyer, upgrading, or relocating to the area, you know, I'd love to help you make a move, whether that's now or a few months from now. Let's connect. All of my contact info is below, whether you want to text, call, Zoom, email, whatever you're most comfortable with. I'll be happy to walk you through the market and what the North Texas market really looks like right now. And of course, if you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any other videos about the Celina, Prosper, and Frisco area.